Hello everyone, I am Dr. Deepak Kumar, Assistant Professor, Department of Humanities, the Bhopal School of Social Sciences. I welcome you all in the second part of the lecture on the Indian Independence Act of 1947. If you remember, in this series of lecture on the history of constitutional development in India, of which this act is the last act. Part 1 of this act was discussed earlier, in which we covered the social, political, cultural background under which this act was enacted. In the second part, we will discuss the main provisions, impact and significance. So let's start. Let me recap. The Indian Independence Act divided the territory of India. It partitioned the former British India into two new dominions, India and Pakistan, which was based on the religious lines, and Muslim majority areas became Pakistan and Hindu majority area became India. This act also is responsible for the mass migration. The partition triggered the largest mass migration in history, with millions of people crossing the newly established borders, fleeing religious violence and seeking safety in their new homelands. The act also redraw the borders. Between India and Pakistan, the border were drawn, leading to an ongoing territorial disputes, particularly over the Kashmir region, which was a source of conflict between the two nations. If you remember from the last class, that on June 3, 1947, Mountbatten Plan was put into action by the Indian Independence Act 1947. It was passed on 18 July 1947. Now, till the new constitution, the act provided that Government of India Act 1935 will prevail. It also appointed a new commission called the Boundary Commission for the redrawing of the boundary. It was later called the Radcliffe Boundary Commission, headed by Sir Cyril Radcliffe. The Indian Independence Act of 1947, its first clause says that act provided for the creation of two independent dominions, namely India and Pakistan, from 15th August 1947. Clause 2 of this act is responsible for the defining of the territories of these two newly dominions. The territories of Indian Dominion were to consist of all Indian provinces except those that comprise Pakistan, whereas the territories of Pakistan were to include the areas covered by the provinces of East Bengal, West Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan and Northwestern Frontier Province. The clause 3 of this act appointed Governor General for both the dominions by His Majesty to represent him for the purpose of the government of the dominions. The act also provided for one common general if both dominions so agreed. The clause 4 of this act says the Indian states were free to accede to either of the two new dominions. Clause 5, which was a very important clause, said that the legislature of each dominion was empowered to frame the laws for the governance of the dominion, which means that no law made by the dominion will be treated as null and void on the ground that it conflicted with any laws of England or any provisions of any existing or future Act of Parliament of the United Kingdom, nor an order in council shall extend to the new dominions. It is very significant. Whereas the clause 6 said, from 15th day of August 1947, the government of the UK shall have no responsibility in respect of the government of any of the territories which immediately before that date were included in the British India. Similarly, clause 7 is also important because it says that the suzerainty of His Majesty over the Indian states shall lapse, and with it all treaties and agreement enforced as the date of passing of this act between His Majesty and the ruler of Indian states. So it ended the suzerainty of the Majesty and all his power. Clause 8 says, the Constitutional Assembly of each dominion shall exercise all powers exercised by the legislature of the dominion. The clause 9 said, The office of the Secretary of State for India and his advisors was abolished, and affairs relating to dominion of India and Pakistan were to be conducted in future by the Secretary of the Commonwealth Relations Department, which existed till date. Now, from our point of view, the last important provision that is provided in the clause 10 says, those persons who had been appointed by the Secretary of State or Secretary of State in Council to civil service and the Crown of India before August 15, 1947, would continue in this service after independence and to enjoy the same privileges and rights in respect of leave, remuneration, pensions. So, the Constitution of India and conditions of service as enjoyed by them before independence. So, these were the important provisions provided by this Act. Now, let us discuss the impact and other important points. Regarding the princely states, the Act says that princely states are given choice to accede to India or Pakistan. So, their accession to India or to Pakistan was based on their choice. It also says the integration into dominion. The princely states can choose India or Pakistan. So, princely states which chose India were gradually integrated into the new dominion, and many princely states were dissolved and merged into larger administrative units. Regarding the citizenship and migration provisions, so the Act says that it establishes the citizenship of the new dominions of India and Pakistan, and all citizens and especially the British subjects domiciled in British India became citizens of either India or Pakistan depending on the place of their residence. The Act also provided for the migration of population because of the partition. So, the population between the two new countries with provisions for the transfer of assets and property, it also provides for that. There are some provisions regarding financial and legal arrangements. What are they? The Indian Independence Act of 1947 made provisions for the financial and legal arrangements between the newly formed dominions of India and Pakistan. This included the division of the public assets, liabilities, financial resources accumulated during the British rule. It also outlined the legal framework for the transfer of power, with the dominions gaining autonomy in legislative, executive and judicial matter. This laid the foundation for the independent constitutional and legal systems of the new countries. So, what happened just after the enactment of this Act? Muhammad Ali Jinnah left for Karachi on August 7, 1947, and on midnight of 14 August and 15 August 1947, Pakistan and India respectively came into existence. The Constituent Assembly then appointed Lord Mountbatten as the first Governor General of the new dominion. In the morning, August 15, 1947, a new cabinet headed by Jawaharlal Nehru was sworn in. This act was a huge act. It was very impactful. So, there were many responses. Let us see some of the important responses. Lord Clement Attlee, regarding the enactment of this act, said that it is the culminating point in a long course of events. Similarly, the newspaper Dawn recorded that this moment or this enactment of this act is momentous and unique piece of legislation. Whereas the newspaper of India, the Hindustan Times, says the noblest and the greatest law ever enacted by a British Parliament. Dr. Rajendra Prasad in his book says regarding this act that the period of domination of British over India ends today, and our relationship with Britain is henceforth going to rest on a basis of equality, of mutual goodwill and mutual profit. Now, let us discuss some of the significance of this act. As we discussed earlier, that the journey which began with the 1773 Act ends with the last act, that is Indian Independence Act of 1947. Because with this act, India gained its independence and also constitution. The Indian Independence Act of 1947 was a groundbreaking piece of legislation that paved the way for the partition of British India and the creation of independent dominions of India and Pakistan. The Act also established the mechanism for the peaceful and orderly transfer of power from the British to the newly formed governments. It also had lasting impact. It had far-reaching consequences, shaping the geopolitical landscape of the Indian subcontinent and influencing the course of history in the region for decades to come. So with this points, the provisions, significance and impact, we end this act. Thank you.